I want you to think back now with me. Maybe when you were a child, what was your favorite game? We all play games as children. What was your favorite game? Specifically, what was your favorite board game? Did you play games as a child? I was going through some boxes last night in my residence there, and I was trying to find some kind of games, and these are the games that I found. Dominoes. Any of you play dominoes? Sometimes. I played this game last night. Well, not really. I didn't really play dominoes. What happened was we accidentally dropped them. They went everywhere in the garage. So we were picking up dominoes. And of course, I found this game here, Chutes and Ladders. Did any of you ever play this game? Some of you play this now? Maybe with grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Played this game a lot with my own children. Oh, here's one of my all-time favorites. Still play this, Yahtzee. Maybe you ever play Yahtzee? I hold the high score in my house. I'm really good at this. I'm not sure why, but I am. Oh, here's another one. I never really liked this game that much. Clue. Have you ever played Clue? Yeah, it's got a big hole in it there. I don't know what happened to it. And of course, hopefully I won't drop this everywhere. One of my all-time favorites is Monopoly. Yeah, Monopoly. What were those two properties that you really wanted more than anything? And Park Place. Yes. You guys are good. Oh, and I found this one, by the way, and a theological education really comes in handy when I play this game with other people, and that is Bible trivia. You want to have great fun with all of your friends? Pull out the Bible trivia. They'll probably never come back. I don't know. Oh, yeah. It's fun to play games. And, we used to have, and still sometimes do, would have like a game night in our home, and all the family would gather around the table, and we play a number of games. But you know what? There is, games are supposed to be fun. And there's one game that we play that's really not that much fun. And that game is the waiting game. You guys ever played that game? The waiting game. It seems like whenever we turn around, there's always something that we are waiting for. Like, for example, when you go to the doctor's office, do you know what time it is? It's game time. You're waiting, right? You find yourself out in traffic during season. You know what time it is? It's game time. The waiting game. We find ourselves waiting a lot. And it's really not a whole lot of fun to wait. Advent is the season in the church that leads up to the celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. It is a time of expectation. It is a time of watching. It's a time of waiting. We find ourselves waiting. And that's a good question. What is it that we are waiting for? What are we waiting for? Maybe we're waiting on God to do something in our lives. Or maybe just the opposite is true, that God is waiting on you and me. Where is this waiting? Well, I look now at Psalm 130, and the writer of the psalm, he's finding himself playing the waiting game. He's waiting. And maybe he's wondering if God is ever going to show up in his life. Because he writes these words. He says, out of the depths. Out of the depths. It's like the psalmist has hit rock bottom. He's down in the valley of the shadow of death. And he says, out of the depths, I cry to you, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for your mercy. And then the psalmist goes on to say, he says, if you, O Lord, if you kept a record of sins, who could stand? And then he says, but with you, I know there is forgiveness. Therefore, you are to be revered. And then for the psalmist, the waiting game begins. He finds himself waiting. And he indicates this by specifically saying, I wait for the Lord. My soul waits, and it's in His Word that I will put my hope. And then again, he writes it. He writes it again. He repeats it. My soul waits for the Lord, more than watchmen wait for the morning. So the psalmist, he finds himself waiting. He is playing that waiting game. And in the same way, during this Advent season, and even in other seasons of our lives, we're going to find ourselves waiting as well. What's the point of it? What's the point of waiting? What is God trying to do in our lives when we are playing that waiting game? What is God trying to do? Well, there are benefits to waiting that God gives to us. And I just want to kind of quickly share these with you. The first thing is this, is that when we find ourselves in a time of waiting, whether we're waiting on God or something else, it gives us the gift of patience, to be more patient. You know, we live in a society today, and we're a part of that society that doesn't like to delay gratification. That we want everything and we want it now. That instant gratification. Everything in an instant. And you know what? Just about anything we want these days, we can almost get it instantly. Why, I even remember when I was in college, if I wanted to do research on a paper or something, you know what I had to do? You have to go to the library, right? Even then, they didn't have internet. We didn't have all of that stuff. I'm so glad that the internet was invented, especially when it came to my master's and my doctoral work, because, boom, I had instant access to information. I didn't necessarily have to go to the library and then look up books and then bring them back to my desk. But anything we want, we can get instantly. Now, there are two disclaimers here when it comes to patience. Number one, God will allow us to be in situations where we will have to wait. Okay? God will allow us to be in those situations where we have to wait. If you want to call it a test, that's okay. If you want to call it an opportunity or whatever, that's okay. You're going to find yourself in situations where you have to wait. Like, for example, right now, you are given an opportunity to wait because you're waiting for me to finish this sermon, right? Wait a second. Now, another disclaimer. Be careful with what we call patience. Be careful there, okay? What we might be calling patience might actually be complacency or apathy in disguise. Oh, I'm just being patient. No, you're being complacent. You're being apathetic, right? So beware of that. Those two can get mixed up sometimes. Being patient doesn't mean that we don't do anything to try to help our situation. or change our situation. So waiting on God gives us the gift of patience. Okay? And we all need more of that. Right? The second thing is waiting on God keeps us from becoming entitled Christians. Did you hear that? Waiting on God keeps us from becoming entitled Christians. By allowing us to wait, God gives us contentment and appreciation for life as it is at that moment. No matter how good or how bad, we find a sense of peace in the moment. But sometimes we as followers of Jesus, sometimes we do feel like we are entitled to certain things from God. Maybe we think that, Lord, I shouldn't be going through this hard time. Lord, I shouldn't be experiencing this pain. I shouldn't be experiencing this suffering. Why, Lord? I thought I was immune to all that. No, we are not. And when we start thinking that way, then it's at that point that we become entitled Christians. You know, I'm reminded one of my favorite movies, and it's entitled Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And I'm talking like the one that came out in 1972. Do you remember that? Do you remember that, starring Gene Wilder? Strange movie, isn't it? Very strange movie, but I always liked it. But anyway, it's the story of 5 children, right, who win an opportunity to tour this mysterious and enchanting chocolate factory. And there was one child by the name of Veruca Salt. Do you remember Veruca Salt? Do you? Well, she was the child that was very rich and very spoiled. And all throughout the movie, she sees things in the factory that she must have. And she wants it at that moment. And so she demands from her father, "Father, I want it now." And of course, he always responds by saying, "Okay, dear, I'll get you whatever you want by the end of the day." She wanted an Oompa Loompa. "I want to take an Oompa Loompa home with me." Do you remember the little orange men? Yeah. She saw the goose that laid the golden eggs. "I want one of those, and I want it now." "Okay, dear, whatever you want, we'll have it for you by the end of the day." But Veruca then responds by stomping her feet and crossing her arms and yelling, "No, I want it now." What was the problem with Veruca Salt? What was the problem? She was a spoiled brat, right? She felt entitled. And because of that, she could never appreciate what she already had in her life, how blessed she already was, and was never content with anything. Always wanted more and always wanted it now. Now, what's my point? My point is, let us be careful not to be Veruca Salt Christians. Okay? Be careful. We're really not entitled to anything from God. And yet God freely and graciously gives to us more than we can even imagine. So, waiting on God, it keeps us from becoming entitled people. The third thing is waiting on God gives us an opportunity to long for and to experience this gift called hope. Hope. It seems like, we live almost in a hopeless world. And a lot of people that I have encountered throughout my life and throughout my ministry, just one of the things that they want more than anything is hope. And instead of there being a hopeless end, that we as followers of Jesus Christ would have an endless hope. And waiting gives us an opportunity to experience hope. You know, if you never had to wait on anything, then you'd never really be able to experience hope that the Lord can give to us. Hope is a gift. And it is through that waiting that God extends that gift to us. Let's go back now to Psalm 130 and see what's going on with the psalmist. When we last left off, here he was. He was down in the dumps. He was down in the depths. And he is waiting on God. He's waiting for God's mercy. And so here it is in Psalm 130 that something has happened. Something has happened. Because in verses 7 and 8, the psalmist responds to God with this tone. It's a different tone. It's a tone of assurance that somehow God has responded. This is what he writes. He writes, O Israel, put your hope in the Lord, for with the Lord is unfailing love, and with Him is full redemption. He Himself will redeem Israel from all their sins. Do you notice there's a difference in the tone of this passage? It's no longer a cry for mercy. But now it has become an exciting call for all of Israel and for you and for me to put our trust, to put our hope in God, even in the midst of waiting. Even in the midst of waiting. Knowing that God somehow, some way, is responding to you and to me. God is always working in our lives. There are things going on in our lives that God is doing that if we could truly see it all, we would just be blown away. God is at work in your lives. We may not be able to see it, but something is happening. And if God is doing it, it is something good. And that's what we see in the psalmist. In Psalm 130, as we see God revealing His gifts, realizing His gifts in the life and in the heart of the psalmist. So my friends, you know what? Advent is a time of waiting. We find ourselves waiting a lot in many different situations. We're waiting during this season for the birth of Jesus Christ, for the arrival of Jesus. But you know what? I don't think that this psalm is as much about us waiting on God as it is God is waiting on you and me. What is God waiting on us to do? What is it? Well, during this season, you see the Advent candles here. And the Advent candles represent 4 different themes. There's love, there's joy, there's hope, there's peace. Those are important. Those are powerful themes. Those are the things that God is waiting for us to live out in our lives. God is waiting for us to be more loving people. God is waiting for us to be more joyful people. God is waiting for us to be more peaceful people. And God is waiting for us to be more hopeful people. Why? Why can we be all those things? Because of Jesus Christ and our faith in our Heavenly Father. Knowing that He's always with us, nothing could separate us from Him, and He's working in our lives in very mysterious ways at times. So, my friends, next time you find yourself sitting around the table, maybe with family and friends, and you're playing a round of Bible trivia, think back to this day and think back to the psalmist and think back to the time when he was playing the waiting game and how God responded. God's people said, Amen. Amen.